Want to start off and say thank you. Thank you, legislators, activists, and reporters for participating in the Virginia Grassroots Coalition's press conference. We are so excited to be going into the 2024 General Assembly session with Democratic majorities in the Virginia State Senate and House of Delegates. And we're hoping to build on this momentum during the legislative session. For those of you who don't know us, the Virginia Grassroots Coalition includes more than 55 grassroots groups and represents more than 15,000 Virginia voters from around the state. Our members work in issue groups to help draft, review, and prioritize legislative bills that we hope will pass this year. We are pleased to share some of these bills with you today, including legislation that promotes clean energy, provides more funding for public schools, puts limitations on campaign finances, prevents gun violence, and advances good governance practices. With Democrats in control of both chambers, the coalition also supports amending the Virginia Constitution to establish a right to contraception and abortion, a right to same-sex marriage, and the automatic restoration of the right to vote after completion of a sentence of a felony conviction. The coalition, however, cannot do this alone, and we encourage you to get involved during the legislative session. You can watch our bill tracker on the Virginia Grassroots Coalition website and use our easy calls to action to contact your legislators about our priority bills. There will also be a number of great lobby days that are planned in Richmond, and I encourage you to find time to meet with your legislators in person to share your own stories and priorities. Finally, I want to thank all of our members for their tireless work to advocate for these legislative priorities, and I would like to urge our legislators to take our call to action seriously. So again, please feel free to put your questions in the chat. And right now, I'd like to bring up our first guests to talk about climate and clean energy. I'd like to first introduce Sharon Shutler. She is a member of the coalition and co-leader of our working group on climate and clean energy. I'm going to turn it over to you, Sharon.
Thanks so much, Louisa. It's so great to be here today. And out of the many, and I mean many excellent bills in this session, we selected several that focus on Dominion and energy and other electric utilities. In particular, HB 638 and Companion Bill SB 230, patroned by Delegate Rip Sullivan and Senator Hashmi, will make it much easier for energy efficiency projects to be approved by the state regulator and increase the amount of distributed solar energy that utilities must achieve. Delegate Sullivan's HJ 30 requires a study of new regulatory processes to better align the electric utilities' financial incentives with our climate and clean energy laws. Finally, HB 116 and SB 192, patroned again by Delegate Sullivan and Senator Subramanian, deals with truly the explosive growth of data centers, which use nearly inconceivable amounts of quantities of energy. These bills will require data centers to purchase renewables and achieve more energy efficiency in exchange for very lucrative tax credits they receive from the Commonwealth. So it is my distinct privilege to introduce Delegate Rip Sullivan, a stalwart climate and clean energy advocate, to highlight his data center bill as well as several others mentioned.
Thanks, Sharon. It is just so great to be with you. Hello, Power Lunchers. Thank you. Thank you to you all, to the coalition for all you do all around the Commonwealth and down here in the General Assembly. It's just impossible to sit through that intro without getting really, really pumped. We've got now three days under our belt. I was with a brand new legislator this morning who said to me that he wasn't used to, he said that he wasn't used to this fast pace. And I had to break the news to him that the first week is actually the only time we do anything slowly. On Monday, it's like jumping on a rocket. And one of the rockets we're going to be jumping on is HB 116 that Sharon talked about. I am really excited about this bill. It's already been tagged a data center bill, but it does not jump into the issue of where should data centers be, how many of them should we have, are they a good idea or not. What it really does is focus on the environmental impacts. And I'm sort of an energy efficiency nerd. It's been part of my niche since I got here. The concept of the bill is, well, look, if we're going to be building data centers, and Sharon is absolutely right, they are huge consumers of power. We ought to at least require them to be absolutely as energy efficient as possible. Seems a small bar to put to make them jump over. for the tax credits that they get and for the power that they require from the grid. So I describe it as a very simple bill, and the data center world is kind of digesting it still, but at least they have been, they haven't run out of my office with their hair on fire. But it sets what I think are reachable standards of making sure that wherever they're building these buildings, that they be highly energy efficient, and that their backup generation capabilities not be good old-fashioned diesel powered generators. There are plenty of other ways to do backup generation that are much cleaner, and we ought to be requiring them to do that. So I've gotten a good reaction to the bill. I'm thrilled that the coalition is going to be behind me on this, and that we're going to have your help. I'm really excited about it, and think we've got a real possibility of success. HJ 30, I call the PBR bill, for the beer drinkers on here. They might think that means Pabst Blue Ribbon, but what it really means is performance-based regulation. This is a bill that would create a study group that would look over the next year and a half. We're not looking to deregulate the industry, but what we are looking to do is take a fresh look at how our utilities are incentivized. Right now, as a practical matter, our utilities make money by building stuff and selling electrons. What I would like to have this group look at, what the bill would require them to look at, is performance-based regulations that would set performance goals decoupled from how much they sell. In other words, why shouldn't they get paid to sell fewer electrons, to work hard to make sure, again, I'm back on the my energy efficiency bandwagon, while selling fewer electrons, incentivize them to sell fewer, and they would get rewarded for that. And there are lots of different ways that other states are looking at that we can incentivize our utilities to build less stuff, build it more efficiently, and sell less power while still making a profit and a return for their investors. And the third bill that Sharon mentioned, another exciting bill, it is HB 638. We call it the ARC bill, Affordable, Reliable, and Competitive. And it is sort of the first time that I have ventured into sort of tweaking the Clean Economy Act. I've been loath to do too much of that over the last couple of years, particularly given the way the General Assembly was made up. But what this does is now, whatever we are, 3.5 years into the Clean Economy Act, we know we want to increase the carve out for distributed energy, so it raises it from 1 to 5. We want to make sure. I think this is really a correction to the Clean Economy Act. The reference to 35% of competitive ownership, third-party ownership of power in the Commonwealth, is being treated as a ceiling. That was not what was intended, and we want to make clear that that's a floor. And then again, getting back on my energy efficiency soapbox, what it would do is, we think, streamline the process for the SCC to approve energy efficiency programs by adopting one single standard rather than the several standards that they use now. So there are a lot of other bills. I've got several other bills, shared solar and some other things, but these are three that I'm really excited about, and I am enormously grateful for the support that the coalition has offered, and I know the good work they're going to do to help us get this thing through.
Thank you, Delegate Sullivan. We actually have 2 questions for you from reporters who are in the room, so I'm going to ask them one at a time. So the first one is, you're sponsoring HB 638, and Hashmi's response has the companion bill to increase the percentage of power purchase agreements allowed for solar and shore wind. A 35% limit was set arbitrarily for Dominion and Appalachian Power by utility regulators. What does removing that cap do for renewables in the VCEA?
I'm hopeful that it'll do a lot. If we've learned nothing over the last several years, is that Virginia's curve is headed up when it comes to renewables, clean energy. And despite what you may be hearing from some quarters, we can and should be on track to meet our goals set forth in the VCA. Having said that, we do know that we can do better. We need to do better. We need to do faster. We need to do more, and that's what this bill is meant to do, and to make clear that 35% is is a floor, not a cap.
Great. And then the second question is from Cardinal News, and it says, you're sponsoring HB 106. Somerville has the companion bill. You're sponsoring 106 and HB 108, Somerville with the companion bills. And these
are
bills
the shared solar bills, right?
Yes, exactly. And so the question is, could you speak to the main benefits of these bills of expanding the availability of Dominion Energy's existing shared solar program?
Well, apropos of the comments I just made, we're having success. A lot of what the VCA was set up to do is working. The shared solar program is working remarkably well, so well that it's actually full. This was set up as a pilot of 200 megawatts. It is full. And unless we pass 106 and Senator Somerville's bill, that program will effectively come to an end because there is no more room. I was in Waynesboro a couple of weeks ago at a ribbon cutting. It might be the first ribbon cutting for one of these shared solar installations coming online. And my favorite conversation of the whole time was with the farmer on whose land this was being built, and he told me that this project was saving his family farm. It was going to enable his family to keep their farm because it gives them a steady stream of income, not subject to Mother Nature's whims. The problem that what these bills try to fix right now is that the program is full. And we have companies coming into Virginia that have been here now, working for the last couple of years to work on the shared solar program. Companies who want to hire people, want to build solar installations, want to help save more family farms, accept the program unless we raise its cap, is full. So apropos of my earlier comments that we're on the right track, we need shared solar is going very well in Virginia. We need to do more of it, and that's what 106 is meant to do.
Fantastic. Well, we need to make it through all of our topics for today. So I want to say thank you so much, Delegate, for joining us. When we get to Q&A at the end of the hour, all of our leads for the issue working groups will be available to answer questions too. So hopefully we can get to additional questions that folks have. But thank you again, and thank you for your leadership on these important bills.
Great to be with you all. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. Well, we are going to move on to our next topic, which is public education. And I would like to introduce Marianne Burke, who is a member of the coalition and co-leader of For Public Education, to share priorities, bills that she and the working group will be working on, and also to introduce our guest speakers. So over to you, Marianne. You are on mute.
How many years have we done this? It's my pleasure, my great pleasure, that I'm able to introduce two chairs of the committees that are going to be hearing education bills today. Senator Ghazala Hashmi, the chair of the Senate Education and Health Committee. She represents Senate District 15, which includes part of the city of Richmond and parts of Chesterfield County. And Delegate Sam Rasool, chair of the House Education Committee, and he represents House District 38, the area around Roanoke. These chairs have a daunting task ahead of them on the heels of two reports recently published by the Joint Legislative and Audit Review Commission. One reporting that Virginia's public schools are seriously underfunded, and one that shows that Virginia has a teacher shortage and that we are increasingly reliant on less than fully licensed teachers. To top that off, Governor Youngkin recently released a proposed budget that did not address the $4 billion in underfunding for our public schools. Today, Senator Hashmi and Delegate Rasool will tell us about the bills they are hearing in their respective committees. And I'm very happy to introduce Senator Hashmi.
Well, thank you so much, Marianne, and thank you to everyone who's joining. And your continued voice and advocacy are always so critical. So really appreciate all the good work. And as Marianne just shared, we are really intentionally quite focused on public education this session. And much of that impetus, of course, are long delayed attention to so many critical areas and also long delayed in blocks to our efforts to address so many of the issues. So the JLARC report did not come as a surprise to most of us, but it really did highlight and give us more data, more clear information about the areas that we need to ensure that we are focused on and that we are working on collectively. So this session, you are certainly going to see many, many bills sponsored by a variety of patrons in both the House and the Senate that are seeking to address specific concerns that emerged from JLARC, as well as from other recent evaluations of Virginia's public education system. And I am carrying an omnibus bill, and the counterpart in the House is being carried by Delegate Rasool on as an effort to seek to address many of those JLARC focus points. And so among those are to make sure that we're doing funding calculations correctly, that we are addressing the needs of vulnerable populations, most specifically our students who have special needs, our students who are English language learners. The omnibus bill also seeks to ensure that we are funding our support staff, our support personnel at the levels that are recommended by our standards of quality. So those are going to be some very critical focus points. In addition to those, we've got individual bills that will address those special populations, EL students, as well as our special needs students, and continue to emphasize the kind of resources that need to be placed within the school districts that are particularly hardest hit among the school districts in Virginia, and ensure that there is adequate funding. There's also a lot of conversation around the funding formula that Virginia currently uses in an attempt to address the funding formula so that we are specifically supporting those school districts that have inequitable opportunities, whether it's low-income communities, large populations of non-English language students, as well as populations of high-need students. And so those conversations around the funding formula will be ongoing for this year, and certainly anticipated to continue in the next 2 years. Many states have already followed this process, and Virginia is hopefully going to see a successful transition into a more equitable funding formula. So I'm going to stop there, and I know Delegate Rasool also has important points to share, and happy to stay on a little longer to answer questions as well.
Fantastic. Yeah, thank you so much. Delegate Rasool, over to you. What else do we need to know?
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me and for the work that you all do. For those of you who are in organizing, wanting to get into organizing, you really need to take notes. Network Nova has been doing a fabulous job for many years, the longevity there. This is a marathon in many ways. And then, of course, the Grassroots Coalition in trying to make sure that we have so many passionate voices that it coalesces and is organized. These are two wonderful organizations that are doing great work for us. So thank you to Louisa, to Robin, to Catherine, all of you for your wonderful work. The governor's introduced budget will actually take us backwards with regards to funding. Not only did it take away over $300 million in public education, but it also rated the fund that we use for school construction. Everywhere you look, really, unfortunately, public education took a hit. We were very surprised. I was very surprised that it was that bad. And so we've got a lot of work to do to catch up, even to a baseline, so that way in 2 years we're not worse off than we were. That's it. That's how bad it is right now. As we think about all of the priorities that Senator Hashmi talked about, as we're carrying joint omnibus bills, around ELL, students with disabilities, funding formula. We also are keeping in mind, we have wonderful people like Delegate Nadarius Clark, who's carrying the bill to say, let's have a 4-year plan to bring our teachers and staff at least to the national average. We've got some of our other freshmen who are carrying bills around having a school counselor ratio that is a gold standard, with mental health being an issue for so many. And Delegate Fegans and Delegate Hernandez are carrying 2 excellent bills. And we're also trying to tackle the way we think about what a school campus looks like. So we've got bills in the House and Senate that are called community schools bills. And we have community schools in Virginia. We're trying to expand the notion that the services, the wraparound services that our students need, that they can get those on campus. In fact, we developed the first one here in Roanoke, where there is a clinic with just like a doctor's clinic on campus, where there's billable activity, and you can go in, you're seeing the doctor, there's a dental chair, there's a room for mental health services. And so that way we envision campuses of the future, and that is community schools. And lastly, we're trying to tackle gun violence prevention in a new way, thinking about programs through the schools. We have many programs that work with our students, but nothing that's actually integrated, or very little that's integrated through the schools. And so we've developed a pilot initiative that will be in Petersburg and Roanoke, that we hope to expand, that's called Community Builders, with a focus on middle schoolers. And we think if we tackle middle schoolers early on, we can set them on the right path, instead of trying to tackle it when it's way too late. So we're excited about the gun violence prevention measures, and about some of the other priorities that we're going to be funding. And most importantly, I will say, as chair of my committee, and I know the senator feels very passionately about this, hate has no home here. And any of these bills will quickly be dispersed with, that are trying to divide us, that are trying to hurt our students, that are trying to limit our ability to be able to learn the information that we all deserve in a good quality liberal arts education. And so those will not receive the time of day. So thank you so much for all of the work that you all do.
Thank you so much to both of you, and what an important message to be sending. So thank you for the courage that takes as well. There's one question that came up in the chat, so let's try to keep the response brief, even though from what I can tell, it probably could take a very long time to explain. But the question was, why is it so difficult to change the funding formula? Do either of you want to address that?
I will try, and that's because the funding formula is really intensely complicated. The funding for our public education comes from many different sources. We've got local funds, state funds, federal funds, and all of that is, they're all tied together. They're all interconnected. They're all coming from a variety of revenue streams as well. And so that's part of the complexity. It is structurally embedded in every school system, in the sense that right now, Virginia's funding formula is driven by staffing ratios. And so it is a model that seeks to align the number of students, the population of students, with a standard set of staff that should be embedded, staff that includes counselors, as well as full-time teachers, teachers assisting in classrooms, special ed. All of that is part of the staffing ratio. What we're seeking to do now is to basically dismantle that structure, which that's the complexity, and then shift the formula so that it takes into account the unique student that is in front of us. So if it is a student who has special needs, as well as English language needs, as well as low income, that student will be funded at a higher level through state funds than previously. And when you put that together inside of one school, if a school is serving a significant population of low-income students, as well as students who need English language skills, students with special needs, those school districts then will receive a larger share of the support. And that's really what has been needed for so long, so that we are ensuring that there is equitable access to state support based on the needs of the students that we are serving those particular areas. It's quite similar to the at-risk add-on that we already have in place, but this expands it so that we are ensuring that school districts, especially our most under-resourced school districts, are not struggling to meet the needs of the families and the students that they serve. So that's a simplified version of it. And I'm sorry if I took too long.
No, that was great. Well, what we need to do is move on to our next topic, but if you're able to stay, please do. We'll have Q&A towards the end of the hour going into the after chat. And if not, we'll make sure to forward any questions onto you that our issue working group leads can't answer. But thank you both for joining us. And thank you again for the leadership that you will be serving in as the chair of the education committees.
Thank you.
All right, so we're going to move on to our next topic, which is good governance. And I would like to introduce April Breslaw, who is a member of the coalition and leader of our working group on good governance. April, over to you.
Well, thank you, Louisa. The bills in the good governance category are a little different than the topics we've just been hearing about, because they cover a range of different kinds of issues that impact both the election cycle itself and our ability as Virginia residents to participate in civic life. So the first one is from Josh Cole, who's introducing legislation that will incorporate current technology into the process for citizens to become candidates for office. Next, we have several progressive lawmakers who are proposing bills that are intended to modernize elections and build consensus through what's called instant runoff, or sometimes ranked choice voting. Expanding local pilot programs using instant runoff in primaries are also being discussed. For candidates already elected to the General Assembly, Irene Shin is patroning an ethics bill that's intended to build accountability for compliance with the conflict of interest rules. And where voters believe an official should be removed from office, Marcus Simon is patroning a bill intended to make that process more fair. Finally, and this one may affect many of us here today, Delegate Elizabeth Bennett Parker has introduced legislation that will expand opportunities for state, local, and regional public bodies to hold virtual meetings. And both Delegate Bennett Parker and Senator Favola are working to expand virtual access for caregivers of the disabled and people who have serious medical conditions. So with all that, I'd love to turn it over to Delegate Bennett Parker to say a few words about the legislation that she's working on.
Thank you so much, April, and thank you, Grassroots Coalition and Network Nova and everyone who's on this call. It's so nice to see you all. Thank you so much for the work you do. I'm excited to discuss House Bill 894 about virtual meetings. I've been working on this topic for years, and I'm excited that it's garnered your support, as well as that of the League of Women Voters, the AARP, the ARC, the Virginia Chamber, the AAUW, the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, the Virginia Conservation Network, and others. So the bill would increase flexibility for advisory public bodies made up of volunteers, like, for example, commissions for women, to hold all virtual meetings. It retains significant guardrails to ensure public access and transparency, and add some additional clarifications. This is about good government, equity, and access. We've heard from advisory bodies across Virginia that they've had to cancel meetings because members were unable to make it in person. And by expanding flexibility for virtual meetings for advisory bodies, we can better recruit and retain older adults, parents, people with disabilities, and more to serve their community and share their lived experience. And as a result, will make better, more representative public policy through that direct participation of diverse voices. I do want to clarify that Virginia Code already allows for remote participation by members of the public in meetings. This bill is about the ability of boards and commissions to hold all virtual meetings. That being said, in addition to the fact that these boards are composed of volunteers who are members of the public, there can be financial and logistical constraints in integrating remote participation with in-person meetings. So adequate hybrid technology and equipment doesn't usually exist in meeting rooms for advisory boards and commissions. I know my local school board was telling me about meetings sort of in the lobby of the high school. If you're not in the room, you don't know what's happening. And additionally, sort of trying to juggle hybrid meetings or remote participation, constrain the technological ability of these advisory boards and commissions and their staff and volunteers. So meeting on an electronic platform can additionally reduce those constraints and simultaneously makes providing remote access to the public easier and more affordable. I could talk about this all day long, but I think that's a good overview. And so thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Delegate Bennett Parker. One question: what is the best way that folks in the Zoom room could help support your bill as it's moving through the committees and through the two houses?
Definitely. I think the first way is to send an email in support to the delegate and senator who represent you. Those are great because their staffs will record your position for them. I do expect there to be a Senate bill, but as of right before this call, it hadn't come up yet. So stay tuned for what that number might be. And then, of course, and it's always important for us to hear from constituents and the people who sent us here about their positions. And then in terms of testimony, we don't know how long we'll have for testimony given a likely heavy agenda. And I'd love to have geographic diversity in that testimony. We've got some great organizational support from NOVA, from like the Northern Virginia Aging Network and others. And I know my constituents in Alexandria are really excited about this and could fill up the whole testimony list. But we also know this is a statewide issue that affects residents in rural areas, given the long distances they have to travel to meetings. It affects Hampton roads and more. In the House, in terms of particular members of interest, it'll go, well, in both the House and Senate, it'll go to general laws. And in the House, it'll likely go to subcommittee number 4 in general laws. But we don't know who those members are yet. So stay tuned. But some of the returning members are likely to be Delegate Coiner, Delegate Wendell Walker, Delegate Knight, and Delegate Leftwich.
Fantastic. And this is why we like to work with our legislators, because we can be specific. And that is really important. Rather than feeling like we need to email everybody, we can be really focused on who really needs to understand our positioning on specific bills. So this is great. And April has put her email in the chat. So if you are interested in helping testify and you're from a diverse part of the Commonwealth, please get in touch with April so that we can make sure we have a variety of different stories to tell. Thank you again, Delegate, for your patronage of this bill and working so hard to get it passed. We appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. So we are now going to move on to our next topic, which is workers and families. And I'm excited to introduce Marie Ann Lyko, who is a member of the coalition and leader of our working group. And she is going to introduce the delegates. So Marie Ann, over to you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Marie Ann Lyko, and I'm a member of a group that advocates for important issues to women and diverse groups. We are members of the FCDC Women's Caucus, Defend Democracy Nova, as well as members of Loudoun County Dems. Our group has been working closely with Delegate Watts on 2 bills. The first bill, House Bill 212, and there is a companion bill in the Senate, SB 393. Both bills are requesting that gender balance and diverse boards be considered a factor when companies are requesting tax breaks from the state of Virginia. Having gender balance and diverse boards is not a new concept. Many states have already proposed or legislated such bills. And there are many major corporations that have gender balance and diverse boards. It is a pro-business bill. A second bill that we are working on with Delegate Watts is HB 128. This bill would exempt canvassing from door-to-door vendors, commonly known as solicitation. Canvassing is to distribute voter information, and it's part of our political process. It is passing along voter information. And with that, I am pleased to introduce the most experienced and knowledgeable delegate in the House of Delegates, Delegate Vivian Watts, who is patroning both of these bills. I would also like to add that Delegate Watts has used her extensive history of getting bills passed to rewrite these bills so that they have a better chance of winning passage in the House this year. Delegate Watts, it's a pleasure to introduce you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Marianne. It's been wonderful working with you, and that practical knowledge that you threw in at the end, it really is important, and deciding what is the most important thing to accomplish, particularly this year when we only have a 1-vote margin in both of the houses, and we have a situation where bills can be vetoed by the governor. This bill had passed, the bill as far as diversity balance on corporate boards that receive any kind of state incentive funding to locate here in Virginia, was one that had passed the Senate with 9 Republican votes last year on a much more stronger bill requiring, but in the Republican-controlled House, it never got out of subcommittee. So that the bill this year says that this shall be considered. Just like there are a number of other factors that are in the code, you consider this before you grant money to bring corporations in. It is also a very good message to corporations as far as what Virginia is as a place to do business. And since many, many corporations have diverse boards, this sends the right message of Virginia as a place to do business, for people to work, for management to relocate in. And I really think with the emphasis on it shall be considered, again, with good corporate backing, with the good, strong support that is right there with Marianne, and I know she'll keep you involved. We should be able to move it through this year. I would be amazed if it got vetoed as a partisan bill. But last year, I was surprised when, in fact, that objection came.
And Delegate Watts.
And the second bill comes right out of my own district, so you always feel the issue that much more closely. A school board member, African American, Black school board member, and a party canvasser were doing the normal thing, contacting door to door, which under Fairfax ordinance totally allowed. Many localities have not passed an ordinance that is in compliance with decades of court decisions about the blending of the right to specifically post your property as no trespassing, and being very specific, whether it's no hunting or whatever it may be, very specific about what that no trespassing means. And in this case, an individual in a community said, our community doesn't want you here, out. And this then, while our local police force did the right thing when they were brought to the scene, the concern that a number of us have is that this should not be faced anywhere throughout the Commonwealth. You can't expect a policeman to necessarily know what all these court decisions have been about the under freedom of speech, what solicitation can mean versus property rights. And this bill will make that clear, hopefully throughout local ordinances throughout the Commonwealth.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Delegate, for your support of both of these bills.
And if I have one more moment, I'm chair of the House Finance Committee. The structure is that on the Senate side, tax law and budgeting go together. On the House side, How you spend the money and how you raise the money, tax policy, is separate. And I have also spent a significant time with the school funding formula over the years. So I want to say just a couple of things. What we are dealing with is a proposal for a major tax cut under restructuring. We need to restructure. I've worked on it significantly from the local perspective as well as the state perspective. And hopefully what I'll be able to structure is so that we really look at the components of what the governor has proposed and what are there as far as where Virginia's structure specifically is out of whack. But when we come back to the school funding formula, the governor did not put in his budget the school funding that we need, which has already been discussed. And when you ask about why does it take so much to get the formula changed, because quite frankly, it's a zero-sum game. And that whatever you change in one area very often then, without new revenue, you will not fund in the new areas. It also impacts the fact of our local tax structure in counties as opposed to cities is almost so heavily dependent upon the real estate tax. And every time that you take away state funding or don't provide state funding, as many other states, and we are really behind on that measure, then it has to be made up with the real estate tax, which also, of course, is all renters. So it really hits people on fixed income. It hits students that are coming out, former students who have student loan debts, who cannot afford housing. And it also really reflects the change in the economy over the last several decades, not only of income spread, but also how the cost of housing has absolutely outpaced every other aspect of the household budget, and the pressure on the real estate tax is in direct relation then to what we don't fund through the state level on a broader based tax structure. Now that's just a hint of what is behind some of those words.
Fantastic. And that's so helpful for people to understand, particularly as this is a budget year, and thinking about both the how we want to spend the money, but how do we get the money that we want to spend? And I really appreciate your insights into that and in your perspective. So we're going to have to move on, but if you're able to stay longer, Delegate, we're going to have Q&A soon. And our next topic is going to be campaign finance reform. And I'd like to introduce Nancy Morgan, who's a member of the coalition and a leader of Big Money Out VA, to speak about this. Nancy, over to you.
Thanks so much, Louisa, and hi, everybody. Our nonpartisan group advocates for campaign finance. And when you look over the 30 years in Virginia history, it's been notoriously elusive. However, we're really optimistic this year that key reforms will be introduced. Why? I think that everybody is aware that this year was the most expensive election in Virginia history. And to top it off, we're apart from Illinois, we had the most expensive legislative elections in the country. And why is this? Because we have some of the most lax campaign finance laws in the country. We're hoping that really this will be the year for reform because legislators are increasingly aware that voters care about this issue. And a lot of it is because of all of you in this room who have sent a lot of letters to legislators. So we have some really great bills this year with wonderful legislative champions. Key among them are that annual, this has been introduced for 10 years, that restricts personal use of campaign finance. This is going to be championed on the Senate side by Jennifer Boysko and on the House side by Marcus Simon and Republican Mike Cherry. A disclosure legislation targeting dark money groups is being introduced by, Barbara Favola and Dan Helmer. A great bill that just dropped is promoting public financing elections. This is by Marcus Simon. He's hoping to introduce, he introduced one focused on statewide and another authorizing local jurisdictions to implement their own program. And then we'll have Scott Serval, who's going to introduce a sign-on letter supporting a constitutional amendment, basically overturning Citizens United and 40 years of Supreme Court ruling. But lastly, and certainly not the least, we're really excited that a strong, well-structured limits bill is being introduced by David Bulova. We're one of 5 states that has no limits, and that is shown by the cost of our elections. Even Dominion Energy is interested in finally having a moratorium on this money arms race. Now I'm really happy to introduce a video by David Bulova from Fairfax. He's going to be he introduced this HB 874. He highlights not only some of the gaps in our legislation, but provides more details about his limits bill. And just to let you know, this is really a great bill that's been the product of intense discussion with inputs from citizen advocates, legislators, and major donors. So I'll let Louisa and Robin show that video.
Good afternoon. I'm David Bulova, and I represent the 11th District in the Virginia House of Delegates. I'm so happy to be here with you and truly appreciate your advocacy as we fight for campaign finance reform here in Virginia. This has been a long time coming. I remember after my very first race in 2005, my wife Gretchen and I thinking how absurd it was that we spent more money on a campaign than on the home that we actually lived in. Fast forward almost 20 years, Virginia's breaking new records, but these are not the kind of records we ought to be proud of. 2023 saw 4 of the most expensive races ever, with several topping the $7 million mark. The simple fact is that most candidates really do want to talk about issues, but Virginia's unlimited campaign contributions forces them to focus more on fundraising than on policy. That both discourages otherwise great candidates and undermines the public's faith in our electoral system. I am very pleased to introduce this year House Bill 875, which if passed, will for the first time set campaign contribution limits in Virginia. The bill will establish a cap of $20,000 per election cycle for statewide officials and members of the Senate, and $10,000 per election cycle for members of the House. I know this won't be easy, but I am confident that we can solve these issues on a bipartisan basis. Thank you again for being champions of good government in Virginia.
Fantastic. And Nancy, you've got just a couple seconds left, but do you want to briefly mention the Democracy Day that you have planned?
Sure. We're organizing the second Democracy Day this year. It's done with a coalition of nonpartisan partners, the League of Women Voters, Upvote Virginia, Represent Us, Common Cause. It's on January 23rd. We hope that you come. We also have a petition that a colleague put in the link. If you please sign that, and we'll deliver it both to the governor and your legislators. And we'll be issuing through Network Nova and the coalition calls to action. And we hope you join us like you did last year. It was so effective. We're trying to target the P&E committee, which is just the members have just been announced. So thanks very much. And we hope that you help us out and raise your voice on this important issue. Thanks, Louisa.
Thank you, Nancy. And last, I would like to talk a little bit about our bills on gun violence prevention. We have a number of important bills that have been introduced. One is Senator Adam Ebbins' SB 100, which prohibits ghost guns. According to the Brady campaign, you do not need a background check to purchase a ghost gun kit or parts, which allows prohibited and dangerous individuals to evade federal and state gun regulations. The availability of ghost gun parts and kits is creating a gaping, dangerous loophole that undermines currently enacted gun-related regulations. And Delegate Dan Helmer's HB 2 and Senator Cray Deed's SB 2 will ban AR-15 style assault firearms and certain ammunition feeding devices. It's a common sense gun safety measure that will keep our communities safer. And now I'd like to introduce Delegate Adele McClure to tell you about the importance of her bill, HB 362.
Hi, I'm Delegate Adele McClure, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all about a bill that I'm carrying. Currently in Virginia, spouses convicted of domestic abuse cannot possess a gun, but that rule does not apply to dating relationships. My bill, HB 362, would close this boyfriend and partner loophole and help save lives. And the data is clear. No abusive partner should have access to guns. And I want to share a few startling statistics. I feel like a lot of people who oppose this bill don't see the folks behind it who are disproportionately impacted, have lost their lives, or are in fear of losing their lives. So I just want you to humanize this issue and think about the folks who are impacted by not having these protections in place year after year. And every year, 556 women are killed by a husband or a male dating partner with a gun. That's an average of one woman every 16 hours. And between 2018 and 2020, the number of intimate partner homicides involving a firearm increased by 22%. Black women are disproportionately impacted and disproportionately the victims of fatal domestic violence with firearms. That accounts for 30% of women shot and killed by a husband or intimate partner in 2020. In America, 60% of mass shooting events between 2014 and 2019 were either domestic violence attacks or perpetuated by those with a history of domestic violence. The use of guns in domestic violence homicides increases the risk of multiple victims by 71%. In non-domestic violence homicides, this likelihood is increased by 39%. That's a stark difference. And we must make sure that we pass these protections and stop allowing these loopholes for abusers, because like I said before, and let me be clear, no abusive partner should have access to guns. So please consider, fighting for HB 362. All those folks who are not on board, and I appreciate having everybody here fighting for bills to continue the progress in Virginia. And thank you all for allowing me the opportunity to speak with you about HB 362.
Fantastic. So we have heard from many speakers over the course of the hour, and they clearly made the case that we still have a lot of work to do in Virginia. We call upon our legislators to pass legislation that serves the interests of all Virginians, not just those with the greatest access or the loudest voice. The Virginia Grassroots Coalition is committed to holding our legislators accountable to their campaign promises. We will be following up this press conference with a letter to our legislators that outlines all of the priority bills that we hope are passed this year. And again, we really encourage you to contact your legislators. We've had multiple meetings with them, and they've said it's so important to be receiving those emails and those phone calls so they can say, I've heard from constituents, and this is how they want me to vote on this bill. So please, when you see our calls to action, take them seriously, and they usually take only a couple of seconds to send. So please get involved this year if you haven't before. And now, since we're almost at the top of the hour, we're going to turn off the recording and stop going live, but we will continue to discuss your questions during the after chat. So please, I welcome everyone to raise your virtual hand, and we will start the conversations.